Now we are recording.
All
right, so welcome to the Majorana Fireside chat. This time
live from Pittsburgh.
Live from Pittsburgh. It's Majorana Fireside. So we went all in on this one. As you can see, we're not sharing slides, so you could enjoy
the real fire behind
the real fire. The whole entourage, and you know, if you're thinking of organizing your own fireside chat out there, beat this. Right? We're very proud of this, and today the theme of today's chat is
Denmark.
Denmark, right? So there's a lot of Majorana research that at least was done in Denmark, and we spent quite a bit of time looking into that research, and there's been some very recent developments along those lines. Not very big ones, but
yeah, kind of important enough that we felt that it's timely to discuss this.
Yeah, and so with this, we have prepared some slides, and we'll go through the slides, and then we will have a discussion. All right, so so imagine yourself in Denmark, the magical houses, beautiful country. Well, no, as I bet nobody in the room knows what it means. I don't know how to pronounce it. Good.
What is it?
So basically, the picture there with the socks and you know, kind of fitting. It's cold outside in Pittsburgh, and yeah, I didn't bring my socks, but. I imagine that it's a very, you know, we're going to be talking about serious things, and so it's, you know, we hope you're all comfortable.
Yes.
Since we're in Pittsburgh, we would like to. Their problem?
It's showing everyone the presenters view.
Oh, sorry for that.
Change on top there. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry for that. There we go. My bad. Yeah.
Still showing the presenters.
I think you should do mirroring.
1 second.
Yeah, I don't know of the fireside. So, well, maybe I'll just keep talking while Vincent is figuring out the laptop. Or you want him to do it? Yeah, so we are in Pittsburgh right now by coincidence, but we will also have another related event. I mean, in this general idea of reproducibility in science. In May, there'll be a conference on reproducibility in physics, and this will be on the topics of how to do experiments in condensed matter physics. That there we go. Yes. Yeah. So here's what I'm trying to advertise here. So how to assure reproducibility in condensed matter physics. What are the best practices? What are the policies? We have some pretty interesting people coming, Nature and Science editors, APS editors, government agents, some of very interesting scientists as well, and you know, Vincent agreed to come as well. So we'll, you know, maybe I'll have to get this room again and do another fireside chat as a sideline on that event, but. Otherwise, yeah, so it's just related, and so I hope you can still sort of check it out. There'll be some live streamed events related to that, and there'll be some in-person events, and also working on a paper as a product of things. We'll be a working conference.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that one. All right, perhaps real quick introduction to ourselves, Sergey. I'll just start. So I'm Vincent Mourik. I have a background in experimental physics, condensed matter physics, quantum physics, all these topics. Did a PhD in Delft, 5 years, then moved to Sydney where I worked on single spins, and now I am since 2 years a junior team leader in Forschungszentrum Jülich, Research Center Jülich in Germany, just across the border from the Netherlands.
Yeah, I'm Sergey Frolov, and I did my PhD at Urbana-Champaign and a couple of postdocs at UBC and Delft. And this is where see the parallel line as this and I overlapped directly, and we just discussed the last time we saw each other was 8 years ago.
I think 8 years and 3 days ago at my PhD defense.
8 years.
In
Yeah.
person, that is.
Yeah, and now I'm a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, where I continue to look at Majorana research, but also
So yeah, this is what we want to run you through today. Pretty much as always in our online chats, we will give you a bit of a background on Majoranas, then about the science paper from 2020, which is the actual topic of today. New report came out last week that was published online. So we want to discuss that, and then we want to talk about all the procedures and what has happened at the institution, and then we'll wrap it up. It will probably take about an hour, I suspect, Sergey. What do you reckon? Something like that?
we'll see.
We'll see.
But yeah, so the new thing about this fireside chat is these institutional concerns. We usually don't talk about them. We try to really stick to science and discussing the errors that we found or the implication of the errors. But in this case, there is sort of an accumulated material we have on you know how we try to get through those various channels, journals, universities, etc.
So it's about this paper on the right that triggered the whole process, but yeah, it's broader than that, as many of you can are aware, I think. Yeah, we will hope you through that. So let's kick off with something about Majoranas. Hey, what are Majoranas?
I thought you were going to.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can ask me the question. So Majoranas, it's an old prediction from the 1930s from Ettore Majorana, who is with us today. Overwatch, overseeing as a sort of overlord. Anyway, so that's an old prediction. Took a long time to trickle into condensed matter. Took about 70, 80 years. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, this became a topic called condensed matter. But the peculiar property really is this little formula on the screen here, that it's a very strange particle. It's a fermionic particle, but it is a particle that is equal to its own antiparticle. And yeah, it makes it a very weird one. Sort of like the man in the picture with the weird non-existing mirror image. Makes it also very difficult to detect because it has very many properties that particles have. You cannot have for this particle. Because, yeah, otherwise it yeah. So it has a solid theoretical foundation. You can see that on the slide. There's all these papers from theoreticians where they had formulas and yeah, made this into models that actually became more and more realistic. So really the Fu and Kane proposal is an important one there. And then the next one is the one about semiconducting nanowires that was a big hit, I would say, in our community that we started really implementing in the lab.
Yeah, and I want to say that nothing wrong with these papers. Some of them are not so realistic, but theory has been verified over and over. It's robust. It can be made more robust by more realistic, but there is no question that theoretically these Majorana should exist.
Just a matter of finding them and showing they exist in real devices and experiments. So yeah, that was our project that we started off in our team in Delft. You can see all the team members below the pictures of the cover image of the paper that we wrote. Was a very interesting time, very intense working, very interesting results where we saw the first hints, we thought, of a Majorana fermion in one of our nano devices, in this nanowire. And that culminated in 2012 in this first experimental paper from our team, which was really sort of the start of looking for real experimental evidence for these particles in condensed matter.
Team led by Leo Kouwenhoorn in Delft,
Yeah.
where I was a postdoc. Vincent and Kunzu were PhD students on that team.
And just to provide you some more context, why this is such an exciting topic to our community is that One thing, of course, it's that an exotic type of quasi-particle in condensed matter, which is always of interest to us physicists. But there is a much broader picture here that you can use these quasi-particles to encode quantum information in there. And by moving them around each other and creating this complicated strand of world lines that you see here on the slide, you are actually performing a quantum computation. And the idea is that this is a robust form of quantum computation because you shake this whole pattern of world lines a little bit. You are not destroying the topology of the computation. You really need to cut strands to do that.
Yeah, you can see noise over there on the pictures, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, it's insensitive to that noise, and that noise is very common, kind of ubiquitous in our world, really. So this, you know, if it works, it's a real breakthrough for quantum computing.
This was realized, I think, very early on, around the same time where people started realizing that this can be done in condensed matter, and that's sort of like from the early days on, there was always this idea this could be great for quantum computing. That I think has been a strong driving force of this topic as well. Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue. So, okay, this is not the first fireside chat we're doing, and we've talked about this Delft research before, so we're not going to talk about it really here much, but just to recap and to set the stage, the group where we did our first paper from 2012 kept on working, and after we left the group, and some of the results, the papers came out with very high profile, didn't make sense to us. We kept discussing it, how can it be quantized? This is just, you know, the zero bias peak. You know, I can't believe that it's so quantized and things like that. And at some point asked for data from one of these papers, the first one on the left on the screen, quantized Majorana conductance. And then from this, we kind of unwound more issues because what we found, I'll show you the next slide, but the upshot is 2 of the papers are retracted at this moment, both from Nature. There is at least 2 more that we analyzed to a degree sufficient to conclude that these are not reliable conclusions of those papers, and we recommended that they should be retracted, and the journals are considering this right now. It's kind of a slow and painful process, but you know, we are staying on it. We are even performing additional analysis for some of these papers. And then there is actually, this is just what we were able to analyze. There's more papers we're interested in from Delft, and we are still sort of trying to get more data out of them.
Cut data. Some papers, some more. We still hope to see data one day. Yeah.
I must say, actually, in comparison to Copenhagen, even though Delft is actually trying very hard to not share data or share the very minimum, they are sharing at least something.
Yeah, it's going very slow, but there's data coming out there, which is good in the end, I would say.
And this could be a topic for an entirely separate fireside chat where we talk about sort of Delft University process and problems with it as well.
All right.
Yeah, you want to talk?
So, what is really behind all this? What is the core of the issue? I think it's this, that in 2012, when we saw the first signatures, these type of zero bias peaks that you see on the screen here in these plots here in the middle.
That is not our paper, this is paper from Vincent Mourik Institute. But
on the left is Weizmann.
About the same time.
These zero bias peaks, we thought, you know, to the best of our knowledge at the time, that we cannot explain this by any other hypothesis than Majorana. As it turned out, within about a year or 2 years, as is often the case, I guess, in science, is that additional work by others, where they deliberately did not try to make Majoranas, but coupled a quantum dot to a superconductor, there they found very similar looking zero bias peaks. And that was sort of an eye-opener, I would say, to the entire experimental community. Like, okay, we need to be much more careful associating this type of zero bias peak with a Majorana fermion. And this was
well, first we said we need to be more careful.
Yeah.
Eventually, this was 2013, 2014, 2015, and for sure 2016. We were like, okay, none of this is Majorana.
Yeah.
All of it is quantum dots and trivial states of quantum dots.
Yeah. And
we call it Silvano states, actually pioneered by Professor Jerry Marcus and his group. in some of their lab notebooks that we saw, but actually from the group of Silvano De Franceschi, Grenoble, who made this discovery that you can have Majorana lookalikes in quantum dots, and nothing to do with topology, not useful for quantum computing, but presents itself in very similar fashion, and much easier to get, much more parameter space that these can occur than Majorana. So chances are, if you're looking for something like this, you will find Silvano states.
And this is, I would say, till the current date, the main issue and open question in this community and in this research field. How can we even distinguish Majoranas, real Majoranas from these type of states? And how would you do that? It's clear it has to go through a lot of careful experimentation.
Yeah, and I would say it's often, I would say it's pretty hard to prove it's Majorana, but it's often very easy to see it's not Majorana, that it's a trivial state.
Yeah. All right, so we will quickly touch upon some of the main problems in the case of the Delft papers, just so you as a refresher and then so that you know what we found.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that, especially in our community, and maybe this was one of the reasons we're having a conference, maybe going back to Henrik Schoen's situation, our community in particular decided that the only problem that is serious in a paper is when you completely make up data.
And you fake it.
If
like
you
the
just
numbers.
went into Photoshop and drew a picture of your data, we all agree that's a problem. Everything else, well,
It's a matter of debate.
yeah, it's a scientific debate. It's and then it starts. Everybody does some of that, and I mean, I disagree with that. And so one of the points we're making is that even with real data or pieces of real data, you can present a claim that is not valid, that is falsified. So this is what we're trying to illustrate here. So this example is a cropped data set. So the data set was larger and it was cropped.
You can see the statement in the paper, and that was basically reliant on the yellow line. And if you would have shown a full data set with the blue line is how it continues, you see it's clearly violated in most of the gate range, and this was being hidden in the paper. And similarly, in the paper, it is suggested that this quantized value that you see up here in the graph, that was really unique and something throughout parameter space. Instead, what we found is that you have all these various scans that show similar data that are shown on the slide here, and only 1 or 2 out of them by chance hit this quantized value, and most of them are 50% lower or 50% higher in value. So
Yeah, so it was an issue of data selection, because cropping is also a type of data selection. You're selecting to show this part, not this. And in this case, it's selection of the entire picture, the one that conforms to your story, but omission of the ones that not just make your story weaker, but that contradict the story you're trying to tell. And this is a fundamental problem. This is in the realm of falsification of conclusions, in my opinion. It's my opinion.
Yeah, you don't need to convince me of that. Yeah, but it's.
I guess it's important to say also that everything we say is a matter of our personal opinion.
Okay, so let's move on to the Niels Bohr Institute, University of Copenhagen, also Microsoft Lab. And from the outside perspective, it's been amazing progress, Sergey. Not one, not two, but 5 times Majoranas were discovered.
Yeah, so we thought in 2012 we discovered sort of one type of Majorana in one system, then we spent another decade trying to deepen and broaden this evidence rather than do some alternative explanations, try to improve samples. In the meantime, a similar group at the University of Copenhagen found Majorana 5 different ways in 5 different systems. And they're not sort of dramatically different. They're all
variations,
superconductor, semiconductor hybrids, but different form factors, different Hamiltonian terms like magnetic shell or full shell, like we're going to talk about now, or it's a 2D
layer with a phase control. And every time there is a Majorana. So I mean, this is just think about it from a statistical point of view. In my opinion, it's either remarkable scientific achievement, or we should maybe look into it. Right? We should look into this body of evidence as well, like we did in the Delft case.
And yeah, that's what we did. We started to look deeper into one of these works.
Yeah, so this was already a while ago. You can see we wrote a report. It's pretty extensive. It took us, I'd say 8 months, something like that, or even more, to work out this report. It was based on additional data that we managed to procure, similar to Delft. Paper shows one type of data. We got a little more data, and so there's a conclusion on the screen.
Yeah, that's and it was really like striking, shocking, I should say in a way. It was really that multiple claims made in the article are not supported by full data. Okay, so throughout the paper, there's a strong suggestion, claims that we think that this is that Majoranas and topological superconductivity were established in this material system. But if you look at data in slightly larger ranges, you find that there's so much contradictory data that the whole smooth, simple story in the paper falls apart.
And I remember when the paper first appeared on Archive. I don't know if it was 2019 or 2018, even thereabouts. I was really happy to see it and very impressed, because they achieved this. They put a full shell of aluminum around the nanowire. And just simply by threading one flux metal through it, which you can do with quite some wiggle room. And this Majorana here, zero bias peak, I was maybe when thinking how to use it, etc. In our experiments, we should try these experiments here, because it really looked from the paper, it looked really, really nice. Yeah, I would imagine. So that I would congratulate the author on this, work.
Yeah, so we will, based on that report, we communicated that with the authors, with science, and as we will detail in what follows, that in the end led to an editorial expression of concern and an institutional investigation into this work. So let's first break down, I would say, the scientific side of this paper. What's going on here? And really, you don't need to know the Majorana theory much, or alternative theories, I would say. We can just look at the basic statements made in the paper about the experimental data. So you can strip it of all the physics, basically, and look at the phenomenology. What is written in the paper about that, and what is in the data.
Yeah, so the phenomenology, I should guide you through it. Maybe Vincent, you can help me with the mouse. It is, in essence, this beautiful picture that is the flagship picture of the whole paper, showed a coincidence of two signals in the same plot. And this coincidence is significant. So one is, Vincent is circling, but maybe you can draw a line with the zero bias peakers. So the bright streak around the middle of the picture and the symmetric one on the left are the zero bias peaks. So that's the same signal from Majorana experiments dating back to 2012 and many works since, including the retracted Delft paper. That's the kind of the signal we scrutinize for whether it's Majorana or not. And the other signal here is these oval shapes. There is a central oval shape, the side oval shape, and on the other side, the other. These are called little Parks oscillations. They come from the fact that the shell of superconductor aluminum is all around the nanowire. So maybe you can see the picture of the sample here, up there. There is the green line, that's the nanowire, the green shell, that's aluminum, it's all around. And when you put magnetic field through that shell, you enclose magnetic flux. And this flux in superconductors is quantized, and it leads to the oscillation, periodic oscillation of superconducting properties, where they completely get suppressed due to destructive interference, then they appear again, and they get suppressed again. And that allows us to calibrate very accurately where we put zero of these vortices, flux quantum wire. Then we put one.
You have one, and you have one, another one, the different.
And so what this picture shows you very clearly and unambiguously is that, look, as soon as you put one vortex, one flux quantum in the wire, the side oval, and also at that moment, bam,
Zero bias.
zero bias peak is there, and throughout that region, right? And we don't want to go too deep into this. You can read our report, right? Where we analyze also what happens in the second one and the third one, and what the paper claims versus what the data shows. But this is why the paper is in Science. This is the claim of the
And
paper.
this is how we read that paper really, that the zero bias peak, that this is really correlated with this first lobe here. That is the main finding, and it is robust. It's something that it's everywhere in this according to the paper.
Sure, and you can also, you don't need to take our word for it. You can go on YouTube and find a lecture of Charlie Marcus.
Yeah.
Where the person himself, the primary author of this paper, the last author, describes these findings in very strong and robust ways. I think it's a lecture at Technion University in Israel. And yeah, maybe we'll link to it in a video once we post it, but you can sort of compare what we understand as what the paper is about versus what Professor Marcus himself understands what this paper is about.
And this is what we found in the fuller data. Like once we saw more data, this is what we found. So this is the same type of images that we showed on the other slide. So these lobes again, zero flux quantum, one flux quantum, the second one. But now you see that there is no zero bias peak, it's a split peak. And in another device,
It's the same sample.
yeah, this is in the exact same sample. The difference is a slightly different gate tuning. So one of the gates is tuned a little bit different. In another sample, there's an example of forks. So sometimes there is a zero bias peak, sometimes there isn't.
Yeah, so the zero bias peak was interesting. In the second example, it takes part of the side oval. So it's not correlated with it, like beginning at the start of the oval and at the end of the oval. It sort of appears halfway through the oval, and it makes this fork where two things come together into the zero bias.
It reminds me a lot of the original data from Grenoble.
Indeed, that's what it makes you think of in the Silvano states. This is how they would.
And then in some other devices, you know, it's not so easy to find zero bias peak, but you find low energy split peaks over here.
In the wrong one.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are just sort of 3 examples, but if you read our report, there are many more examples. There from about, I want to say 10 samples. And the overall conclusion is, just like in that Delft paper, you show one picture in the paper, you don't show a whole bunch of pictures that don't look like that. And that's for different
different devices,
different parameters.
but also within the same device for slightly different parameters. Like you wiggle a gate a little bit, you get an entirely different picture.
Right, but as we will talk about.
None of that is being shown in the paper.
Yeah, so I said the gate is an
Electric potential that is routed next to the wire, next to the tunnel junction, and figure 2E in this picture, in this paper, conveys that the effect is insensitive to this electric field. So you have that there, but throughout the gate range shown from -1.2 to 0.8, there is a zero bias feature. They say it goes from peak to a tip. We say it goes from peak to a split peak, but in any case, all of that the paper attributes to Majorana and to its signature zero bias peak. And this is very important for this particular paper, that there is no gate effect to talk about because of simple physics consideration. The wire is enclosed in metal. Metals screen electric fields, they cannot go in. So Majorana is inside the wire. It's inside the wire. Then electric fields from outside the wire should not be affecting this Majorana. So when you read this paper, and if they show you, oh, this only happens for a particular gate, you have a big question in your head. Is it actually related to the inside of the wire, to the flux that goes through the wire around the shell? Or is it something just living on the edge where electric fields can penetrate the wire?
Yeah, and there's a quite a sweeping statement is being made in the text of the paper, like in the first lobe, the sweep of the backgate of the tunnel gate here showed a zero energy state throughout the tunneling regime.
I guess we will talk about the tunneling regime.
Yeah.
Right, but it clearly refers to figure 2E and throughout that regime. Figure 2E.
Let's look at some larger range data from the exact same device at almost the same magnetic field. These data scans are taken a couple of days apart, so they don't look exactly identical. Common problem in these mesoscopic, in these nanoscale devices, that something jumps a little bit. So yeah, there's always small differences. But overall, this is the same regime and the same behavior as shown in the previous data set. So what we indicate here with the blue line is the range of gates shown in the paper. And then we have these boxes here that we indicate. So green boxes means there is no zero bias peak in this scan. And pink boxes is for this particular scan, there is a zero bias peak. And yeah, likely this feature here that is almost the same length as what was shown in the paper has jumped a little bit downward in position.
Yeah, we're not complaining that the blue line doesn't overlap with the
That's pretty
with the white purple line, because there was probably a shift.
The real problem that we see here is that the range of this zero bias peak compared to the total range that was investigated is a fraction. It's like 20% or less of the total range. And there is no zero bias peak here. But if you look at the conductance values here, this is tunneling regime. We have 0.1 G naught or so conductance. And we do see low energy features, so we can clearly resolve spectroscopically states that are in this device. But what are they? They are split peaks.
Right.
It's not zero
And
bias
then
peak.
just, even at the more basic level, this picture breaks down that gate does not do anything. Look at this. Of course, the gate does a lot of things here. The gate removes the zero bias peak, and it removes it on the scale that exactly corresponds to at least the magnitude of the range, the figure of the paper. So basically, as soon as you go outside that figure, likely splits. And another interesting thing is that there's another zero bias peak here beyond the figure on the more positive side. So it is not one region, it is two regions in this case. And of course, all this data were available to the authors, even if device keeps shifting and changing due to some charge rearrangements. The authors, the experimentalists, they saw all these data coming in for drawing their conclusions, and so they were exposed to all these behaviors of their devices.
But, and that is the important point, I guess, the referees, the science editors, and the readers of the journal afterwards were not exposed, of course, to all this. We all didn't know this. We only know that now.
This is just the same thing comparing.
Just to quickly compare this once again, so that you have a good understanding of this issue. Sergey, what are you doing here?
Okay, you want me to explain?
I think you're flying.
Yeah, well, I like this analogy, right? So if you,
How old were you in that picture?
What do you mean?
It's like, it's not recent.
What do you mean? It's from yesterday.
Okay. Anyway,
I don't know, I was a postdoc. Yeah, so if you don't like thinking about gates and flux quantization and Majoranas, think about this, because this is exactly the same, okay, in my opinion. At least I think it's a helpful analogy, let me put it this way. So many of us taking pictures of ourselves flying, right? So you jump up and you're not touching the ground, hey, I'm flying, right? And also like the picture on the left, not just because of how young I look, but also because you don't see the ground at all. It's cropped away, or the photographer shows the frame in such a way that you don't see if I'm standing on anything or if I'm actually flying in these mountains, right? So nothing was actually cropped. It was just a choice of frame. And so, yeah, you can write a paper about this, maybe try to send it to Science Magazine and see if they accept it, because the degree of evidence should be sufficient,
There's no chute in the
Right.
backpack?
because, I mean, what,
There's no parachute in the backpack?
which backpack? Oh, that's just a charge jump. That's not a real backpack. No, so yeah, so throughout the photo, we see a human flying and so of course we know that human is not flying. We know that if I take a photo 1 second later, the human will be on the ground. Or if we take it 1 second before, the human will be on the ground. We don't show those pictures.
All right. There's another issue that we want to point out because it hints at alternative interpretations. And that is that there's again a strong statement around zero flux in this device. There's a hard proximity induced gap with no subgap features. So basically what this is saying, we have pretty much perfect superconductivity in this nanowire and no spurious states that can lead to problems when we start applying magnetic fields.
Yeah, so it's just basically like saying, we showed you that the middle oval is empty, and then the first oval, there's a zero bias peak, right? And so it's also part of the story, important part of the story, that the middle oval is empty. Why? Because if there was something there, you start thinking, well, those things could lower in energy and become zero bias peaks, so those Silvano states must be there. So they say, oh, there's nothing there. It just appears out of empty air. When we put the flux on, it appears there. So what the additional data show is there is plenty of features, and some of it is kind of tucked away next to this big bright line, but
as we speak.
to us, as soon as we got more data, we saw, what do you mean there is no features? There's features all over, and this is data from the same device, the figure 2 device, device number 1. There are more examples in our report where these states at zero field in the zero oval and the middle oval are all over the place, and you kind of have to hunt for a region without them. You have to very fine-tunedly select the point where they're hidden, where you don't see them.
For example. So to wrap this up, as Sergey already said multiple times, you can read the story in our report. We think that the main claim of this paper are just not supported when you look at the fuller data set. Okay, and if we break that down, this story is built up in a number of subclaims that are necessary to arrive at this conclusion. Then, first of all, contrary to what the paper states, there are commonly states visible in the zeroth lobe at zero magnetic field below the superconducting gap. The zero bias peak is not stable throughout the first lobe, not at all. It is most of the time absent or a split peak, or maybe it is living in that lobe for a little while. There's another point the authors make, that there's an even odd pattern. So you get this only when you have odd flux quanta, so 1, 3, 5, but not with 0 and 2. Well, we found clear examples throughout these various devices that this is not the case, that you can actually also get it in the second lobe. And then there is an artificial, in our opinion, an artificial contrast is being made between good and bad devices in this paper. So one device that didn't show nice zero bias peaks was being argued this is a control device that, because of some physical properties, cannot show the zero bias peak in the shell. We find that this is arbitrary. Devices that were claimed to show the zero bias peak robustly also have many regimes where they don't show the zero bias peak. So it's really selecting data within devices and across devices pretty much at will to facilitate this story.
Yeah, importantly that for the flagship device 1, there isn't a set of data that would support
what the paper claims.
All right. So,
Yeah, I guess don't need to go through everything written on the screen, but just to reiterate that this is about how data are selected for presentation, which is under the, in our opinion, under the umbrella of falsification of claims. And then there are distinct issues when there's data fabrication or data manipulation, and some of them can be more severe or less severe, but data falsification is also a very serious problem. It can be done using real data. So you actually taken this data, maybe you chose the frame so that it shows exactly what you want to see, what you want to show. But it's a serious issue. It completely invalidates, in our opinion, the paper.
yeah, the physics is just not there.
The physics that is claimed is not there, or even just the claims contained in the sentences of the paper are not there.
All right. What is, I think, new in this case compared to the Delft case, that pretty soon in time after this paper was published, there were replication studies, and they were published in high-profile journals. So what happened, this was a collaboration between IST Austria, the group of Jorgos Katsaros there, and Copenhagen. And Copenhagen...
Theory from Madrid.
Theory from Madrid, sorry. Yeah, so Copenhagen, the Copenhagen growers shared the nanowires with this team, and they made a very similar device and tried to do the same experiment. And they reached basically an orthogonal conclusion.
Well, I would even say they actually wanted to get this flux controlled Majorana. This is what I
felt the
understood.
same like you did.
That's what I understood from them, is that they were really wanted to get the same effect and, you know, maybe push it further. They were happy to get the same wires. Because that's my understanding from some of the discussions. And what they found, of course, is that just like the fuller data from Copenhagen itself show, that were not shown in the paper, that you can have any alignment of zero bias peak and the little parts oscillations.
Here
In
in this series of scans is probably the most striking example. Like I am indicating here this first load that should have the zero bias peak. Well, there's examples where there is a split peak. You change the gate by a tiny bit, you get the zero bias peaks coming down to sit for part of the load at zero.
fork. That's a
Fork, or how we call it. Then you change the gate a little bit more, and you get actually your zero bias peak. But
And they,
it's fine-tuned.
To complete my analogy with the jumping person, here is a monkey jumping in the water, and you see monkey at all stages of the jump, trying to prepare for the jump in the air, but it's not a flying monkey. How do I know it? Well, I know it from common sense. I also know it because I see the monkey moving and eventually landing in the water. So that's what this work from Austria, that's what they did. They showed monkey at all stages of the jump.
And I want to highlight this, that we asked them to share more data of these experiments, and then we got an extensive data set from them within a couple of weeks. When the paper was still on archive.
With some notes to clarify. And...
I want to thank the authors for that. Then there is a second, so this paper was published in Science, so in the same journal where the original paper was published, which is actually rare in our community, I would say. And we need to, I want to thank the Science editors for that as well.
It was good on the editors that they really published such a negative replication study on their earlier paper.
So then there is a second replication attempt. So this was basically covering the first half of the Copenhagen paper. So far we've only spoken about this first half, but in that paper there is a second half. And basically the two parts neatly fit together in the story and enhance each other and confirm the same underlying physics.
Yeah, so I guess we'll have to switch gears a little bit, so kind of offload a little bit all the zero bias peak and little parts from your brain, although it's still there, similar devices. In the Copenhagen paper, Science 2020 that we're scrutinizing, there's a second experimental part. There's also a theory part. This is actually a big paper. The second experimental part is same nanowires, but it's a different technique. It's an
island. So the shell is only there in a middle segment of the wire, and then left and right, it's interrupted. And electrons can be confined to that island, so they have electrostatic energy, charging energy on the island. And what the Copenhagen group was doing here is counting this energy and tracking these energies in magnetic field. So you go from show them where the zero lobe is here and where is the first lobe here. In this representation, the kind of zero lobe, yeah, white stripes, that's zero lobe, then the yellow mark is where superconductivity disappears, little parts, then it appears again. So what you want to look at is how the peaks are wiggling in that middle region. And from the wiggles of the peaks with field, are you still with me? From how they space, how they breathe, how they go like this, you deduce Majorana energy. Okay. And we will show you later, this Majorana energy in Marcus' work is always exponential. We'll show you what it means, but this is what the Georgios Katsaros and his team found on the same wires from the same paper or similar, same growth chamber. What is plotted in this plot, where the marker is on the vertical axis, is this Majorana energy, peak splitting.
It's a tiny energy scale, by the way.
In this case, yeah, sure. And then on the horizontal axis is a length.
So that's the length of the device over here.
Right. And so what they found is there is no dependence of energy on length that is very apparent. And second, for a given device length, for a given green island length in the picture, you can control that energy, again, with a gate that's outside. This is not supposed to influence this parameter because Majoranas are inside. But it still controls it, and you can choose any value controlled by an order of magnitude in these pictures
So
for each device.
gives us a lot of freedom, like we get rid of this point, we get rid of this point and that point, and suddenly we start seeing an exponential trend.
Right, or we can have an exponential increase in energy with length.
We can fit something to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure with more data, we can add even more data points. So this is kind of a scientific
Yeah, so-
rebuttal of the second part, and here is.
Oh yeah, one thing I want to highlight before we move on, like this was published in Nature. Like we are at times very critical of Nature Springer for good reasons, but I think this is good that they published this because the original paper where this effect was first claimed was published in Nature. This reproduction attempt was also published in Nature. So this we already told you, like we have these two different type of measurements. These two different type of devices. Here you can see the islands that they used, decreasing length. That is this horizontal axis, and then here the energy splitting of the Majoranas on these islands. Here you can see that this is like almost a perfect exponential.
Yeah, it's
This is all in the first lobe, that you can see this value here is 0.1, that is the same range where you sit here. So we have a very compelling story of the zero bias peak coinciding with this first lobe and this exponential dependence on these island devices. So case closed. That was the story. Well,
certainly the authors try to argue that when we criticize the technique of the lab, which we call tunneling technique, then they said, well, we still have the
yeah, that was like we indicated problems in this
And
left
of course,
part, and then they said, oh, but you have not found problems in the right part.
We are happy to look at that as well, but we didn't have access to the data.
They didn't share the data, so we were pretty limited.
So we had the Katsaros work to go by.
Yes. So you can see that this is this negative reproduction of the peak story. And here you pretty much we consider this also a negative reproduction of this exponential dependence because it's very easy to get here. You can't fit anything really. Who knows what type of dependence you fit here.
And I must say, in my opinion, very similar devices, very similar nanowires. I think even some of them from the same batch of wires, how they grew together. Then
different groups, right?
And look, nominally, the data looks the same. We can really understand how the data from the Copenhagen team matches with the data from the Austrian team. It's just they did a more extensive measurement, I would say.
No, I think they both did extensive measurements, but only
That's what I
one
mean.
group,
That's what I
in
mean.
my opinion, one group only shows part of their measurement that gives the beautiful pictures. The other group discloses all of their measurements. And the picture is not there, or it's there in a mix, but it's not anything special.
Yeah, so this goes much further. This exponential protection of zero modes, this was a paper that had quite some impact at the time. There's more than 1,000 citations published in Nature. Well, we now know that it's very easy to generate these pictures if you allow for data selection, maybe even in the experiment itself or afterwards. Then any picture you want, you can make pretty much.
And I must say that this Coulomb technique,
was not verified by any other group.
Yeah, it's only one group that has claimed Majorana using this
people
technique.
have tried the same experiments, also in Delft,
Yeah.
in Austria, in my group a little bit. But none of them arrived to the same conclusions about this exponential protection. And here we have these 4 papers. I think there is at least one more using this Coulomb technique to argue for Majorana. At least 3 of these papers have these exponential graphs that we showed you in Katsara's case. You can sort of tune the splitting and make it exponential growth, exponential decrease, whatever you want. And then one paper just shows in larger wires, smaller splitting, smaller wires, larger. But it's a reasonable question to ask. Well, if the technique is questionable, perhaps you should share the data so that we could look at what you actually got there.
Yeah, also for all these earlier papers. Puts this, in my opinion, into question. I don't understand how this can be.
In my opinion, this cannot be. This just cannot be.
Now we change gears, I think, a little bit. Now we move to the part where we want to talk about institutional processes, etc., data sharing, those things. So yeah, it's getting long time-wise, but I hope you are still interested and want to stay with us. Yeah, so how did this start? Well, very basic. The moment the Katsaros paper was put on the archive, Sergey and I were looking at this, like we were talking a lot at the time. And we were like, yeah, these 2 papers, it sort of looks similar, the devices and experiment and the data, but it's opposite conclusions. How can this be? So we wrote a pretty open email, I would say, to both team leaders and to the science editor, like, can we please see more data from both your experiments? Because we cannot reconcile this picture. Really, at this stage is what we wrote, we fail to reconcile the diverging conclusions reached by both teams if we look at the papers as they were published. So yeah, share your full data set with us. That should help us understanding the differences and please. So, as we already told you, what happened in the Katsaros case, I would say that was very normal. I would say like fast even, it was normal, he responded, and within 3-4 weeks, we got the 600 extra data sets and an explanatory notebook to that sort of guides you through it. We looked at it, and yeah, the data and the story in the paper made sense together. Wasn't that much effort to reach that point.
Indeed, yeah, I mean, looking at 600 data sets is, for us, working on this, is not a problem, it's one week of work.
So, at the Copenhagen site, on the marker side, we had a very different experience. So, first of all, no response for weeks. 8 weeks or 6 weeks without a response. Then we got a response, and it was...
Well, people are busy.
Sure, but this is an important question.
But these are important people.
Still, I have an important question. Yeah, so what was the response? It was on basically...
Did that sound all right on Twitter? There's 7 billion people on Earth, and I cannot give data to every one of them.
Yeah. Well, just put it online for them to download. You don't have to give it, they can download it themselves.
So smart. Okay.
Anyway, So basically the response we got is that all the data was shared already. And if you go to these references there, what you get is the numerical data for the paper figure. So the range is only in the paper.
And it's helpful.
And that is already helpful
yeah.
so that you can plot it yourself and tweak the color scale a little bit. So
Because a few issues we found even in those data. Like they hidden tucked away in the trivial states near the gap. But really, like we argued to you for 1 hour, the real problems are in the data, not in the paper. We need to see additional data.
yeah, so that they refused to share. They didn't want to share it. And that continued for a while, and we basically broke this down to the science editors in the document, like why do we need to see more data? And then the science editors started really engaging with Marcus on this, like, look, according to our policies, you need to share more data. And then, in my opinion, reluctantly, they shared a bit more data after 3 months.
Yeah, not full data, but
Yeah, that was
enough
also-
for us to start our work.
And that is basically the data on which our report is based. Yeah,
Yeah, we could take it pretty far in terms of finding big conclusions.
yeah, but the second half of the paper, we were pretty limited, I would say. That we-
Cool part,
yeah.
yeah.
That was just not enough data shared too much. So, okay, we wrote our concerns to science and to the authors. Science engaged with the Institute about this. And they asked, so science took our concerns very serious, which again, I want to thank them for that. And they took it up with the institution, which in this case is the Niels Bohr Institute. So what then happened was that the director of that institute wrote an official letter, you can see it here, to the editor-in-chief of science, Holden Thorpe, that happened in early 2021. It was a very brief letter, and we said, something along the lines of, don't worry, we did an investigation, and here are the conclusions. We find no problems with the paper, nor with the conclusions, nor with the data supporting the claims. Complaints of Frolov and justified. All data connected with the present paper as, according to demand, being transmitted rightfully to third parties. No additional data is left out.
So I must say, it's unfortunately a very standard response for various institutional officials that they try to make it go away. And if it goes away, they're lucky, they're successful, we don't have to deal with it anymore. And this happens not only in Europe, also in the United States. And this is really a problem, like this type of email, this type of letter, you can sort of recognize it. I've seen it several times.
Now, already back then we argued that, but especially now we know that A, B, C are all wrong. These are claims that are simply wrong and misleading. Okay, so our report shows that there are significant problems, and the expert report in the external panels report in Copenhagen that we will talk about in a second found even more problems. So there are many issues with this paper. That means that our complaints, of course, are justified.
Yeah, and also the recommendations from Austria.
Others, yeah. And this one is an important one. Very early on already, Thompson, this director of the institute, was misleading the science editors. Well, we know that the experts found much more data. It's factual.
Yeah, this is actually factual. So even Professor Marcus himself admitted in later communication that there was more data. So the point, even if you say what you want about Mr. Frolov and Mr. Mourik, but if they say there wasn't any more data, and then there was more data, that's
By a factor 10 at least.
an incorrect statement.
Yeah, it's an incorrect statement. So I think there's something else very damaging that Thompson did. He leaked our names to the press. So up until that point, we had kept this entirely confidential. It was between science, us, and Copenhagen. And Katsaros was aware as well. But everybody, I think, kept this under the wraps. And it was like,
I don't know, Katsar was aware that we were investigating.
no, he knew that we asked for data.
Yeah.
That he knew. So in that sense, that but this was a confidential process in our opinion.
And this is important because.
And what does Thompson do? He sends this letter to Retraction Watch. And next thing we get is Retraction Watch, of course, and forcing us, asking us to go on record.
Yeah, so if you send this document to a journalist, they can use all the information in it. they may have found it themselves through other channels. But you make this job real easy for them, and they don't have to hide our names. They don't care about that. So we were kind of forced to go public also with our findings to protect ourselves. So we put our report online to say, look, our claims are justified. Here's the analysis that we did. At least we believe they're justified. And you know, for somebody who is especially a whistleblower, no matter you're a professor or no matter how protected you are, there are risks. There are risks in your community that people will spread misinformation about you, and you know, try to portray you as this irrational person that goes after people, etc. There are various risks.
Yeah, so this is why we put our report online, the one that we're constantly mentioning, which you should read. Also, what happened that this inaction, I should say, really, of the Niels Bohr Institute triggered science. Like science didn't, luckily, I would say, and again, what I think of that didn't buy into this. It was pretty obvious that this was not a photo independent investigation. And science, I think must have been some communications about this, but in the end, this goes too far. We put an expression of concern on the paper, and they filed a complaint with what is called the Practice Committee at the University of Copenhagen, which is the body that looks into research integrity questions.
Research integrity.
Oh, yeah.
Questionable research practice.
Questionable research. Yeah. This is an insider comment that we will explain. So, as a consequence of that, the University of Copenhagen started looking into this and appointed.
So this will be a second investigation, right? They
Yes.
already did one. There's no problems found. Niels Bohr Institute. Then science said, what was this? We don't buy it. That's my interpretation of this expression of concern. So they said, okay, let us try again.
And that is this second interview, which is now done by a committee which is still of the University of Copenhagen, but a bit further removed from the Niels Bohr Institute. It's supposedly to be independent and within the university. And
they gathered them, they gave them a task.
Yeah, so what that practice committee did is they appointed 4 external physicists into a panel and told them, like, you need to look at the complaint filed by science. What are the questions science asked you to investigate, and you need to look at the technical side of the criticism of us, in a sense, and compare it to all the data. So that's these 4 people. Then they wrote a report, and recently,
Like 2 years.
yeah, they took the time. It took 2 years exactly. That's a bit disappointing that it took all that long. We only spoke with them for hours in those 2 years. Yeah. Anyway, so that was posted again because of the press getting wind of this. Basically, getting their hands on this report, they decided to also post it themselves online. So this report is now available for everybody to read, and we can. We've had it for a while, but we kept it confidential. But now we can discuss this as well.
Yeah, and I must say, personally, I am very disappointed in this report and in how these 4 people could come up with these conclusions that you see on the screen based on their own report. Because the report finds even more issues, like in the Coulomb blockade section that they actually got the data for. They find that it's not exponential as fully expected, and that weakens the claims, we'll show. But in spite of what we found and they themselves found, they, in my opinion, just lack the resolve to just say this paper cannot be rescued. It needs to be retracted. And so you can read the conclusion, you know, blah, 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 long text, but essentially data represent the outcomes of the experiments. There may be some slight selection issues. But you know, monkeys do fly. Humans do fly. The conclusions are valid. And you know, they recommend some very mild action, like, oh, add a note to this paper. It's fine. And this is really disappointing, like, I can't imagine being on such a panel. And
Or maybe
what
that's,
kind of process they have to go through to write this kind of text in the conclusion part. Personally, I don't understand.
maybe that's not why you're not being asked to be on such panels. Anyway. So, to expand a little bit on this, what we just said, this is a plot from that expert report that I think it's an informative and interesting plot actually, and I'm happy that they made all this data surface and did this had this additional analysis being carried
Yeah, I'm
out.
not sure it's their component this or
No, like-
one of the authors, but in any case, it's in the report.
And I kind of want to, for due diligence, I would like to reproduce it myself and really recreate this plot. But
Yeah, I suspect it's even worse.
in any case, what you see here is that this bit of complicated legend here on the plot, but the takeaway message is that there are many more devices in which this Coulomb blockade technique was researched. So these peak splittings and how they wiggle, like this Majorana energy scale, and there's much more spread. Okay, especially for the longer devices where it becomes more uncertain how to define this properly, but also here. And what is striking, and they write an explicit statement about this in the report, that they see no good reason why this outlier was rejected, why it was taken out of the plot. In the opinion of the experts, this outlier here should have been included in the
This
plot.
one is of course gate tunable too.
And that is,
Just
This is
as
striking.
Taurus' nature paper, the new negative reproduction.
we can understand all this, of course. We fully anticipated, having seen what the Austrian team
Yeah,
found.
but if you read Copenhagen papers, you will never see this.
You see all these beautiful lines,
Paper after paper is, whenever they measure Coulomb peaks, it's always exponential.
So really, this panel in the paper needs to be replaced with a panel like this. And an exponential line fitted to this will look pretty terrible.
But that creates a problem with the theory part.
Because, yes, we find that only topological phases with a large gap show an exponential decay of the lowest excitation energy over large range of violence consistent with localized end states.
So this is an excerpt from the theoretical part of the paper, which we have not talked about in this chat. And that's because there is just no analysis done on it. It actually also probably should be analyzed as well. But we have not done it, and it doesn't look like the Copenhagen physicists have done it. But what this sentence says, and this is why the authors argued this Coulomb technique is so important, is that it's basically a litmus test for Majorana. So if there is an exponential, that, according to their simulations, happens when there is a topological gap, which means Majorana. So when there is Majorana, it's exponential. Not exponential, at least cannot say it's Majorana, could be some kind of weird Majorana, but it could be anything. And so one more thing in the paper gone. And then, the title of this slide, no retraction correction. The idea here is that, let's imagine, you can go forward, it's fine.
Yeah.
Let's imagine what you would have to do to this paper. What kind, and this is not even touching the text, this is just figures, right? Experimental figures. What would need to be done to correct this paper? And so for Coulomb blockade, it's basically replacing that graph with the one that has nothing exponential in it. And for this one,
All these panels need to be, perhaps you keep this nice panel in, but you need to show 3 other ones then that reflect that there's so much variation in this.
Yeah, so
zero bias.
the blue graphs, the 3 blue graphs over there, what they show you is that as you change gate,
Yeah.
zero bias peak goes away.
And
In
then,
the first row, in the second, the oval on the side.
and this one where you see this little, this range of where the zero bias peak is visible should be, this one should be where you see this large range where there are no zero bias peaks.
And the empty gap, right?
The empty gap, this should be emphasized that there are actually subgap states. You can sort of see them in this line.
Yeah, they're sort of tucked away, but even Marcus has another science paper from 2016 where those
Yeah.
bumps are discussed as Andreev states.
Yeah,
which we now call Sivano states thanks to Charlie Marcus. But at the time they were called Andreev states.
Yeah, so I think they were aware that these were actually looks to me as if they were.
They studied that very carefully and got it into science.
They wrote a whole paper on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't see how this can be rescued. Like it will be a complete rewrite of the paper and the conclusions and the title, everything.
So how would the report writers, in face of all this evidence, what did they have to do to their analysis to then recommend no actions?
I don't know the answer, I'm sorry.
It's in the next slide.
Well, some answers, I guess. All right, tunneling machine,
Yeah,
let's see.
that's one of the, in my opinion, tricks
that they pulled in that report, which is really disappointing to me personally. And this goes back to that sentence we already showed you in the quotes on the right. In the first lobe, zero energy state throughout the tunneling regime. Throughout the tunneling regime. So they say, well, what it means tunneling regime? You know, let's look at it in more detail. Maybe there is no contradiction. Maybe this is exactly the tunneling regime that is shown in this picture, and therefore the authors did not misrepresent their data. And then they say, oh, so we asked the authors, what does it mean, the tunneling regime?
And then,
And actually the authors came up with something that is contrary to our understanding of the tunneling regime, which is all conductance below 1 is tunneling. But it's a definition that the panel went with, and I don't know if you want to put a mark there. Oh no, on the text. So it's a range of conductance from 0.05, no, up. Yeah, 0.05 to 0.2. So they exclude the higher conductance and they exclude the tail. And something in the middle, kind of lowish, is where the tunneling regime is. And then the panel.
arbitrary in my opinion, but I don't know how to define it. It's like no good physical reason.
I mean, I've been working on this for 20 years, and to me, it's like, okay.
Like, yeah.
But I actually went through this. I went and applied this definition to the data, and that is in a separate video. I don't want to give you another 20-minute lecture. Where I opened the data on my computer and I plotted, and the screenshot is kind of representative. When I apply the criterion to the data that we already showed you for the gate dependence, that forest of stuff is in that window, that they specified.
And that is apparently qualifies as a featureless tunnel junction.
Right.
With
So
that's
the definition, just like there is no data that fits this definition that they cooked up, in my opinion, post hoc.
yeah,
We have some evidence of it. We'll show you.
Let's get to
But also, I did another thing in that video. I compared the range that I get for this 0.05 to 0.2 with where the zero bias peaks appear. And it's not matching. It's not throughout. It's both outside and inside that window that you have zero bias peaks. Which means our original finding from our report is still valid.
So this, we think, is a post hoc explanation. It's both ad hoc and post hoc. And clear evidence we have for that in one of the first responses to our criticism that was still at the stage where this was happening not publicly.
Yeah, we showed the authors our findings,
Yeah.
and they had some kind of a response, and this is the response.
And what does Marcus write? We are not aware of any quantitative criterion that we could have used. So like,
Yeah, so in 2021, there was no criteria, like no 0.5 to 0.05 to 0.2.
yeah, it was.
Then a year later, university convenes a committee, and now there is a criteria, which still doesn't work, but
A committee asked, like, what was your criterion? Like, how did you exactly define this and select this? Okay, we give you a criteria.
yeah. So my guess, my personal guess is something like they came to Charlie Marcus's lab and said, you did a good job on this, right? And they said, of course we did. Okay, well, I guess we have to write it in the report. This is my interpretation.
Yeah, yeah, let's move on a little bit on the procedural side a little bit. Copenhagen panel. How is this? How does it fit in the big
Yeah, so
picture?
you
How is this
imagine
connected?
a panel appointed of independent people that really look into this, and they may have their own motivations, but like a jury, right? You have a jury selection process, and they, you know, go to a jury of the president of the United States, and they ask, are you a supporter of the president, or are you against the president? And you have to say something like, I don't care about the president in order to be on that jury. Otherwise, you're not on the jury, whether you're a friend or foe. And that applies to any situation. So there's many examples. I don't know, Richard Feynman investigating the space shuttle incident was independent of the astronauts and the people who launched the shuttle. Or the Bell Labs people investigating Hendrik Schoen. I'm not aware of any conflicts there. Delft panel that just looked at the Majorana data, you know, they wrote a good scientific report. They added a section that was not called for there on their own views about the integrity. But we are not aware of conflicts or connections that are beyond like, oh, I met them at the conference, I invited them for a talk, which is fine in the physics community. That doesn't disqualify it.
So we want to zoom in on this because here the situation is rather different in our opinion. And
Yeah, so the panel appears to have a lot of connections here that shouldn't really be there. And that we think is a problem. And we don't know if that influenced the report or not, but given that the conclusions of the report are so surprising based on the evidence, we just think we should highlight these connections.
so let's start. So for the first person here on the left, there's nothing to say. At least that we don't. Yeah.
Don't know of any connections that are not.
This one is an important one, I think. So this is about another unfortunate incident in our community, I would say, the broader community. So there is this paper about Majorana fermions in two-dimensional, in the quantum Hall two-dimensional topological system. After hard work of many of our colleagues in this community, Molenkamp is on record that he contributed to that, and Laurens Molenkamp, he can probably say more if he wishes about this. It was proven that here data was fake. This was falsification of the data. Paper was retracted. Kang Wang, the principal investigator here, and a rather senior professor, denies all wrongdoing and just keeps going. But who does he keep going with? Well, he publishes, since the retraction of this paper, Alan MacDonald co-authors as a theoretician 3 papers with this person.
Yeah, so we showed one paper, actually 2 more papers for kind
And this is after this news broke.
after the retraction.
So.
Yeah, very serious grounds. I mean, even if you
Still not with us on the fact that you can select data and to completely misrepresent the conclusions of the paper. You should agree that if the data did not exist and they were, in our opinion, made up, and we've seen all the evidence, that paper should be retracted, right? That's kind of like the most common denominator that we can all agree on, hopefully.
But then I think there is a problem if you decide to keep collaborating with a person that denies that any of this happened. Should you be investigating another paper where we have questions of data selection, etc., falsification of the claims for the same journal Science?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that the retraction happened at Science. It was an editorial retraction where the author feels, is my guess, harmed by the journal. And then collaborating extensively with one of the panel investigators working on the request from the editor of Science, saying, hey, investigate this other paper. And then maybe communicating with this set researcher who says, oh, the editors of Science are not fair. This is just a guess, but this is a possibility, right? So these connections, you have to avoid them, whether or not the person acts on this, because you want to assure that the process runs correctly, and you don't have reports that present unfounded conclusions.
There's further connection here that we want to highlight. those two people sat on the same government's advisory board for a while, for about a year or so, or 2 years, in the recent past. Like half year or 1 year, perhaps before this panel was appointed.
Yeah, so this is a Department of Energy Quantum Science Center. It's a big research center in the United States. Professor McDonald is the chair and remains the chair of the Science Advisory Board of the center. Professor Marcus was on another board, governance board of the same center, but I believe also involved in the research of the center, or at least has been involved. If you go to the website, he actually no longer appears there, and we think it's because he quit his position with Microsoft. But they were connected, and you can imagine if the paper is retracted where these people are kind of involved, this is unpleasant when you are in charge or a prominent person in such a big research center. There is kind of a certain pressure to one direction.
Okay, next person on the panel, Professor Hakonen. Yeah, what happened there? He is part in Finland. They launched a nationwide conglomerate institute, I would like to call it. I don't think it's a physical institute, but it connects and unites all the researchers in the country that work on quantum. Professor Hakonen is part of that as his group leader. And in early 2023, so right at the time when Professor Hakonen was writing the report, Professor Marcus gets a chair of excellence at that institute. We are unaware that, yeah, we don't know if this was declared, it doesn't look like it, but we find it troublesome. Like if within your own institute, the person that you are investigating for possibilities of, doing the science wrong, yeah, if you're in your own institute, then well, you are investigating, writing the report, most likely the timeline sort of matches, then this person is appointed there. That creates, in our opinion, a
Conflict of interest.
conflict.
I think in this case, this is the conflict.
Then the third one, and the third one we want to highlight here is, and here I must say that this person actually declared a conflict of interest and stepped off the panel, but that was after it had commenced its work, after we had an interview with the panel.
Yeah, so we met all four of them, they all contributed to the discussion, they all had influence on the investigation.
And then, this person stepped off because he was part of a joint grant application, probably with a number of researchers, including Professor Marcus. And that is reflected also in a recent paper from 2024, where you can see that they co-authored together. They're really collaborating on a topic as part of a small consortium.
And another thing to point out is Jukka Pekola, the last author of that paper.
Yeah, it's also at this Finnish Quantum Institute. He's the director of that.
He is within this institute above Hakonen.
Yes.
And kind of a boss. I don't know if it's
I don't
know a boss, but better not to have this when you investigate.
And the thing is that we asked the practice committee at the University of Copenhagen, how will you deal with this? And they assured us.
Yeah, we were concerned because, Professor Marcus is a well-known scientist with many connections, part of many centers. And we were concerned that, they would select some people that might have such connections.
And in our opinion, this did happen.
Yeah, so this letter doesn't show the date, but this was after in
2021. Yeah. So this is a big question. We have to the practice committee there, like how could you do this? So there's a further component to this. Of course, we already suggested or pointed out that there is good grounds to believe that there are other papers that have where we cannot, from the paper itself, cannot understand how data were selected and how claims were supported.
Yeah, well, some of them we already showed you, some of the other Coulomb blockade papers. There is a paper about quantized conductance. Same physics claimed as in Delft, the retracted paper. So of course, you want to look into this one. Physics is under question.
So over the course of 2021, we kept asking for every now and then, okay, we want to also see more data from this paper for these and these and these reasons.
And
So-
we want to see more, even from more papers. We just sort of gave up asking because it's futile, in our opinion.
Yeah,
We
because
are not giving any data.
Professor Marcus is by and large, he doesn't respond to these emails, and when we forced him to respond through a complaint, he denied all our requests. So we've also asked this to all co-authors, people at many institutions, junior, senior, doesn't matter, nobody responds. Okay, so you're a co-author on a paper. According to the Danish Code of Conduct, where you were at the time, many of these people, you are supposed to share and facilitate independent verification of your research. But when the question comes, you just don't.
Yeah, if you have the data, just share it.
So, yeah, this exactly. So in the end, we saw no other option than file a separate complaint about this one to the practice committee, where we actually do allege that this is a violation of the Danish Code of Conduct. Okay?
The data share.
The data sharing. Okay, specifically about all these data requests that are being stolen. So what does the practice committee do? They shelve it. They don't look into that. They respond to us, no, we first look into this first complaint, and then we look into this data sharing complaint.
It's a kind of paradoxical thinking that we still don't have an explanation for. So depending on whether in the first science paper where we already investigated, whether their process, like with those appointed physicists, leads to some conclusion that in some case, in some sense, validates our findings. In that case, we are entitled to data from other papers. And only in that case, maybe. But so the two cases, how are they connected, right? You ask for data from 5 papers or 7, 10. No, because you already asked about one. We are going to link those others to this one. And then, by the way, if you go to the journal, they'll say each paper has to stand on its own.
Yeah. So this is a direct violation, we think, with the Danish Code of Conduct as well. So the University of Copenhagen itself, as an organization, is violating their national code of conduct, which I find it personally shocking. Like, you can have these beautiful documents in your country, and apparently, when it comes to it, it doesn't mean much.
Yeah, working in the United States, I wish we had such clear and powerful code of conduct in this country when it comes to data sharing. But when I see how institutions respond in Denmark or in the Netherlands as well, I am discouraged.
So we know from an accidental email that the secretary of the committee accidentally sent to us as well that they don't really intend to share any of this data based on their report. So I don't know how we will take this up, but one way to do it is ask public attention for it, as we are doing now. So the current data is we are
Almost done.
almost done. If you're still with us, we thank you for that. So there is another weird thing that we only found out about recently, is that under Danish law, this is actually really done at a legal level in Denmark. If there is only the possibility of misconduct, and the way the complaint by science was phrased, it does ask if there is a possibility of misconduct. It raises that possibility. Then under Danish law, the university should not have investigated itself.
And that's a very good law, by the way, in my opinion, because university itself, we talked about the conflicts of interest of the people they found externally, but university has an obvious conflict investigating itself.
They have no interest in doing a full transparent investigation, because who knows what it might surface. They want to avoid that. So the University of CPH has violated this, and they investigated on their own for 2 years. We don't know why. Then in the end they did, because they sort of had to report this to the national board, and they said, wait a second, why did you do all this? Give the case to us. So now the case is, the national board is investigating, and if they.
So every time you should be hopeful, right? I mean, you give each of these institutions a chance to follow some kind of reasonable procedure. And you might be disappointed after 2 years or 1 year. But at this point, we are hopeful there's another body, more independent, it seems, looking into this. We are willing to cooperate with this body. We did reach out to them. We didn't get through the sort of bureaucratic generic responses so far, but we're happy to provide them with our findings, our materials we collected about this case, if they're interested. And we hope that this process will be a comprehensive one.
All right. Shall we wrap up?
Yes.
So there is probably no need to, well, maybe we should wrap up. So there were several components to this. Long fireside chat that we had, at least we were warm.
Oh, yeah. I hope it was.
So we have found by now non-representative data selection first in Delft, but it's the same problem we believe, and we have evidence for that in Copenhagen in the research done related to the Microsoft labs. Specifically for this case in Copenhagen, we found fuller data that contradicts the first half of the science paper. The panel themselves found data contradicting the second half of the paper, and we have shown you that independent reproduction studies just don't find the same behavior in that data.
They find it as a particular case.
Yeah.
They don't find the conclusions.
We put into question the entire process in Copenhagen. We see conflicts of interest in the panel and strange connections that shouldn't be there. There have been factually untrue statements about the data sharing from the director of the Niels Bohr Institute. They claim that they didn't find any problems initially. Institution at the highest level where we can address this denies data. So they didn't refer this case to the national board where they should have done. So a number of irregularities that we think are important. One could see a pattern here. I don't know. Yeah. That should perhaps be investigated.
Yeah, unfortunately, these are not surprising. This happens at other places too. But it's not a reason to not highlight these.
Yeah, then what we think should happen to this paper, we stand by our initial recommendation throughout. We have not seen anything that makes us change our mind. The conclusions of the new report from Copenhagen, it has uncovered important new evidence, found more problems, but the conclusions don't match that. And we honestly don't understand why that happened.
Yeah, I think what we put there. Conclusions of the new report are not supported by the report. It's like if you read both reports, it's just more and more problems. And then one report says, well, what can you do? You have to retract. And the other one says, well, there's nothing to do here. It's kind of all right.
Yeah, a correction really would mean rewriting the entire paper, which, that's
So we're still gonna do the marked up PDF, right?
we can.
With all the red sentences with the post and replace and the new figures.
Yeah, it would be useful.
We're gonna post it online.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have time.
Yeah, and there is this whole problem that we find similar structures in many other papers from this team that raise questions and yeah, if I have the strength, then I hope you feel the same. And the will to continue this, we will investigate this eventually once the data surfaces. It may take years, but eventually data hopefully does surface, and then we can.
I am quite certain.
All right, let's end on once more on a positive note.
Positive, yeah.
It's positive.
As positive as possible, because look, why are we talking about this? There's so many papers like this. Why this one? What will happen to the co-authors of these papers? I mean, to some degree, we are doing this, at least I am doing this, for the young people, for the future generation, that I want to train how to do science well, and also want to prepare a scientific playground for them that is safe from, frivolous claiming of magical effects. From cynicism associated with it. Yeah, everybody does it. It's time to move on. Let's not talk about this.
I want to bring it in, I want to talk about this. I want to look for solutions to these problems together. And I think Vincent does too. So we're gonna meet in Pittsburgh and start this discussion, please. Pay attention to this, please contribute. And that's as positive as it gets, right? We want to keep trying to do better. And we want to invite the community with us into this.
All right.
So that's all we have to say, right?
Yes, there's still 19 participants that stayed with us
Wow.
throughout. I'm very proud of you because this was a big one.
a few folks here.
Yes. So perhaps if you have specific questions, this is the time now to put them in the chat, I would say. Or in
Yeah,
the
should
Q&A.
we actually stop recording?
Yeah, we can stop
Have
the
discussion
recording.
without
Yeah, that is.
without the recording.
All right.
So we stop the recording now.
Yeah, so that you can, if you like,